Welcome to another episode of Grief Talk, everything you want to know about grief and more. I'm your host, Vonne Solis. As an author, life transformation coach, online instructor, and bereaved mom since 2005, I'll be bringing you great content that is informative, inspiring, and practical. Whether you have suffered a loss or other adversity, stay tuned and tapped in as I cover a variety of topics to help you get where you want to go on your journey to heal and grow. Today's guest is Deeann Graham, the award-winning author of Head On, Stories of Alopecia, and an alopecia coach, consultant, educator, and advocate. She was first diagnosed with alopecia areata when she was 7 years old. Deeann published Head On, Stories of Alopecia, to share stories and photos of people around the world who are living with alopecia in order to provide a broad perspective on the journey of hair loss. Educating communities in order to empower others who have been diagnosed, especially in the beauty and medical industries, is an important part of Deeann's outreach. She is also the host of the Alopecia Life podcast, where she continues to educate and share stories to help others realize that they are not alone. Okay, so welcome to another episode of Grief Talk, everything you want to know about grief and more. Today, I invited back Deeann Graham, and we had a conversation a short while ago, and I'm actually going to be linking or at least providing the link to that episode in the description below. But today, rather than a more formal interview, Deeann and I are just going to have a straight-up conversation between two women who have experiences in the topics that we're going to be talking about today. But first of all, I just want to say, hi, Deeann, and thank you for coming back on my show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Vonne.
Excellent. So Deeann and I know each other in the business world, and I think we're becoming fast friends. And a couple of events have happened in her world, which is a world of living with alopecia. And unless you're under a rock, you will know all about certain events that have happened. We're right now in early April, and it happened around the Oscars. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the effects of that, and we'll surprise you about what we're going to say. But that was a trigger point for us. And the other thing that happened in her world, which I'm going to let Deeann talk about to the degree that she wants to and as openly as she wants to, because it is a sensitive subject, is a suicide of a young 12-year-old young lady who was bullied, living with alopecia. And it did bring some media attention in the United States. And as much as we can, we're going to dive into the topic of bullying, suicide as a result of bullying, mostly, I think, related to children, teens, and young people, and then move on into I want to talk a little bit about when the focus gets lost. And Deeann, I'm sure you're interested in that too. So when the media runs with a story and uses it almost, in my view, for clickbait. Sometimes it's for the good of, it could be fundraising, but mostly it is almost like driving by, staring by. I forget what they call it, but when you drive by an accident and you just sit there and stare. And for those of us that are on the other end of it, I lost my 22-year-old daughter to suicide. Her name was Janaya. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Janaya today because I am certain she was bullied. I was just saying to Deeann before we got the recording going that bullying is not just taking place in the backyard. Bullying does not just look like a punch or a slap. Bullying is exclusion. Bullying is staring. Bullying is pointing. And my daughter was mixed race, half West Indian, half white. And there was a lot of racism that she faced. And I am certain because of her personality and being very, very shy and very quiet and also very brilliant and moving around a little bit, she couldn't really find her place. So there was some bullying that also took place, in my view, in the classroom, even by the teachers. And we're going to dive into that a little bit. So really looking at what bullying is, what it means. And Deeann is going to share from her experience in the alopecia world, which, as I said, unless you've been living under a rock, you will now probably know what alopecia is. So that might be one thing the media has brought to the attention of the masses. But digging deep underneath that, I want to start, Deanne, with just basically, again, welcoming you to the show, letting you have a free voice. This is not an interview. This is two women, both of us moms, both of us living with our experiences. And for me as a bereaved mom, I'm not bullied, but I do feel isolated, and I feel all the same triggers that, of pain that I am assuming my daughter would have felt. And I want to talk about what we can do to stop bullying. And I'm just going to do my header up to that is I do think a lot of it starts in the home, but extends to the entire community. So opening up the floor to you, Deanne, start with whatever you want to, because we might be jumping around because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So I'm just going to invite you to start wherever you want to. And yeah, you go, girl.
Right. So I think, let's see, where should we jump in? I think, like you said, if no one's living under a rock, they do know what happened at the Oscars. And, I actually want to talk a little bit less about the act of what happened and what's more behind it, right? We heard the comment, and then most people, I mean, even within the alopecia community, a lot of people did not realize that Jada Pinkett Smith is living with alopecia areata. So, and any form of alopecia, right? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about that too. Well, she doesn't really have alopecia areata. She has this. And I'm like, this is hair loss. She's struggling with it. She's talked about it in the media. So, her peers in all likelihood did know that she was living with hair loss. And so Chris Rock says a comment about G.I. Jane, and, it was not a very good comment or joke. It was just a comment, and Will Smith laughed at it. We all saw that, and that has a lot of talk about it too. But then I saw Jada Pinkett Smith's face, and I was like, oh, this hit hard. And I knew me and millions of other people felt what she felt in that moment. Oh, here I am on the world stage being taunted, right? And I was like, whoa. And was that serious? Absolutely. Was it a joke? Should we have? There's so many different things that people are talking about, but in the end, when Will Smith went up and smacked him across the face, a lot of us were like, oh, he deserved it, right? And a lot of other people were saying, oh, we shouldn't handle things in that way. But the real piece of it was Jada Pinkett Smith behind it, right? And it all really has gotten a little bit lost with the act of what Will Smith did, smacking Chris Rock across the face. So there's that piece. And subsequently, we've had a lot of memes, a lot of follow up in the media, and we're still talking about it over a week later, which really does show a lot about what people don't know about alopecia, and the fact that people are talking about it now. And this isn't just within our in the United States. We're talking about it in the UK, in Australia, because people around the world are living with alopecia and understand what it is to have this happen to them publicly.
So just a quick question that I want to pop in there, Deanne. Is this a good thing? Like, I get that we're not going to, well, I don't, you focus on that's violence, and maybe the violent community or the abusive community, people abused are going to jump in on that whole thing of the slap part of it. But is this a good thing? I mean, and this might be a tough question to answer, that Will Smith slap of Chris Rock has brought attention to the alopecia world. Is this a good thing?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I think absolutely it is. And of course, we don't want to ever associate violence with raising awareness, right?
You're right.
I think it really does speak to the secondary stuff that's going on in the home when you lose your hair, right? I mean, your husband, your kids, your friends, they all see how people react to you in public, and feel free to say whatever it is. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong that he did that in that moment. I just feel like it's a real moment.
Exactly.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm not putting up with this, and smack. How many times have other people wanted to do that in our lives? And instead there's been glares, or there's been, hey, stop staring, or, a moment to teach, which was lost in this moment. It was really a great opportunity to teach, right? I mean, he could have done a million other things. He could have, I don't know how many paces was that he took to get up there, 7, and he had that many opportunities to say, wait a minute, instead I'm gonna embrace Chris Rock, whisper in his ear, or I'm not gonna say anything and I'm gonna just sit there and talk to him later. I mean, I don't know. It is what it is, right? It came down to what happened, and people are talking about alopecia, and not necessarily in a positive way either. There's some great positive things coming out of it. A lot of interviews happening, but we just had something with, I think it's Bill Mayer.
Bill Maher. What did he say?
Oh, well, I can't swear,
No.
but he basically said that if she didn't want to get ridiculed publicly, that she should just put an effing wig on it. I mean, and so
Oh, Bill.
harshness of the words, but those are words we hear all the time. Well, if you don't want to get talked about, if you don't want to be questioned, if you don't want to, then you should just cover that up. I mean, the fact that he said actually ridiculed, or made fun of was a bit, I mean, you're just like, oh, this is the way that we are walking in the world, right? And so and that's been more recent in the last couple days that has come up.
I'm very sad to hear about that because what in my view, what happens is when people like public figures do even make a joke, are sarcastic, it's and whatever else negative, it does actually have an impact and influences the unruly behavior of other people who don't understand people who are living with conditions, vulnerabilities, you name it, whatever we're living with. And here's something I'm going to throw at you right now before I forget. If this is impacting the majority of adults that I'm going to assume, I know we're never supposed to assume, but I'm going to maybe presume that are posting on Facebook, that are having these reactions. And the conversation that I've seen has been more around adults, a few adult women speaking out who have adult alopecia as adults. What the heck is this doing to the poor kids?
Right, right.
Have you seen that in your community? Like any reference to that?
I mean, every single post within social media that I'm part of was talking about this, right? And it's dying down a little bit, but I did see one particular post that said a mother woke up the next morning and had to talk to her daughter, and I don't even know how old her daughter was, and said, listen, there's probably going to be some GI Jane jokes going around that you need to be aware of. And then she had to kind of explain what happened, and I'm like, oh my God, why are we having to do this? And guess what, that little girl went to school the next day and it happened. I mean, exactly like the mother anticipated, it happened. And no matter how much we want to believe that people are good and people are going to not just latch on to something like this, it still happened. And you kind of think, excuse me, you kind of think, okay, yeah, people are going to rise above. People are going to do this, but it's easy to just say, okay, we're going to just say, you're a GI Jane. I mean, and GI Jane itself isn't, it's a strong, powerful woman. And,
Yeah.
it's not become that, right? It's not about that anymore. It's about the look of her.
Well, is it not, though, if I can sort of bring it back to the whole thing about bullying in general? So the slap highlights the bullying. The bullying for right now might be centered more in media around the term GI Jane, but I'm pretty sure there's other types of bullying that have been going on for a really, really long time. That if you even want to speak to that, what's going on in schoolyards, how they're treating kids. And I know I opened up with the suicide of the young lady, age 12, which that's where I've said to you, those parents have crossed over into my world. Hence, we have an ongoing connection, you and I, Deann, in our different worlds. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of the bullying and in terms of the bullying that leads to suicides of young people, which is the case for a lot of suicides in my community, teen and children. What are some of the other things? So the slap by a celebrity of a comedian highlights the bullying, but what are some of the things that have been going around in your world for, if you want to focus on kids, teens, adults, all three, that you either even experienced yourself as a child? I know you've been living with alopecia since you were a young child. And what the heck we can do about it, because I'm on the suicide end of it, and surely that is not the result that we want, people, right? And audience, viewers, listeners, you don't want that for your kid. And while it's so important to understand what's truly going on in your child's life with whatever they happen to be living with, however they look, whatever makes them a target, you need to be aware. And we'll talk about that when we close out, what parents, families, school systems, the whole community that's in our children's lives, in all of our lives, how they can better support us. But yeah, so going back, if you could sort of speak to, it's not just about the G.I. Jane joke. What else are they dealing with?
I mean, in the most simple way, right? The kids and adults will latch on to things like asking questions to draw attention to what's going on. I mean, you cannot get away from it on the playground when you're young, where adults and children will be saying, "Oh, you're bald. Your hair is weird," depending on what stage of hair loss you're in. And so kids can't just be kids playing on the playground. They have to answer these questions. And I think, children are being given an opportunity to advocate for themselves, but do we want them to have to be able to do that, so early?
No.
Can't I just go down the slide without being questioned by an adult why I left the house looking like this, and why my parent let me cut my hair in this manner? And it's just kind of an amazing, it's an opportunity, I guess, for parents to just go talk to their kids and go, "Oh, yeah, they have this, but why is it?" I mean, after all this, will there be playgrounds where parents are just aware of this and can tell their kids, if they come to them on the playground and say, "Oh, I wonder why that kid doesn't have hair like me," right? And they'll say, "Oh, maybe it's alopecia." And a lot of the time, that is all that kids need. They need a name to it. This is talk about so much. They don't need to know what alopecia is. They go, "Oh, it's alopecia. Oh, it's this." And a lot of the time, interactions on the playground are a little kid coming up to another little kid going, "Oh, you look a little bit different than me." And this little kid says, "Yeah, I do. I have alopecia. Okay, let's go play." I mean, it's
Exactly.
too, that is okay, because there is, if you don't know as children, it's not a bad thing to be okay asking, or to just be curious, but to be mean, right? That's another thing. Taunting and saying, "You're bald, you're bald." I mean, it's just that is a normal thing, though. I mean, I got that on the playground, but that's also coming from a place of lack of education, lack of awareness. And so depending on what's going on in the home, what's going on publicly, you can really address a lot of that just by knowing. And, it's not up to the kid to always have to educate, or the parent having to do that. It's like, hey, that's what Google's for. Go home and ask, why might children be losing their hair? And you'll find a lot of different responses. So, yeah.
What do you think about the responsibility of teachers who has a child or teen in their class? I don't know, maybe it changes by the time they're teens, but certainly starting, I think so much starts in early childhood years. And like you said, as soon as you name something, the threat of it, and also I think the allure of the taunting goes away, because it's being called out. And often so much bullying goes on in in silence on the part of the one who is being bullied. This is going to be a major assumption I'm making because I was not bullied, but I do know that a silent voice makes us feel vulnerable, and in our vulnerability, we can very well become targets for a number of different things. But anyway, what do you think the role of teachers would be? And I know your kids are okay. Let me rephrase that. Stop. I know your children do not live with alopecia, correct? I'm correct about that, right? And if they did, what would you want your child to, like, what would you want to have happen in your child's classroom the moment they go to school? Like, is there some advantage to having a teacher call it out with the kids and say, anybody who's visibly different, and I'm not talking about just living in an alopecia world, and I'm talking about also with a parent's permission. I have a reason I'm bringing this up. But where it's visible and where there's permission and the child feels okay with it, just get it out in the open and say, anybody have any questions right at the beginning? Would that stop bullying?
I do believe that voicing it can promote enough awareness that kids are comfortable sharing and talking about it. I like to say, always look to the guidance of your child. Ask them questions. Would you like to do this? I have a number of ways you can handle this, right? And you can, I even say, if your child is so painfully shy that they don't want to talk about it, playground, because we want our kids to be able to go to the playground. I know I keep coming back to the playground, but it's so important when they're very young. Have a business card, print it out. When somebody asks about it, it says, it gives you the resources to look to. It says, I have alopecia. I'm uncomfortable talking about it. I'm very shy talking about it. Whatever you want to put on there, you can say, my name is Carly, or whatever it might be, and then pass it out. They can go look at those resources. Everybody has their phone. They can sit there and look at it right there and understand it a little bit better, right? So you've got your painfully shy child, but you also have kids who don't mind talking about it and want to lead something at school. And then you really need the support of the school system, right? Your teacher going, hey, this sounds like a great opportunity for children to learn, because it's not, like you said, it's a visible difference, but every child feels different at one point in their life, in the classroom or anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it helps other children to go, oh, I feel different in this way. And talking about it is okay. People can be more accepting than I actually think they are. So, so there's that. And I always say, there's books that you can bring into the classroom and read, but that really does have to work with the school, right?
Yeah.
The teacher has to be willing to do that. The principal has to be doing that. You oftentimes have a school counselor. There are things like 504 plans in our country that you can get extra support. I mean, I talk about parents, or I talk to parents saying, wouldn't it be just be nice if we could have a conversation with the school saying, hey, it's important that my child wear a hat for her comfort, his comfort in the classroom. I know you have a no hat policy, but this is the way they feel most comfortable, right?
Wait, I have to jump in here. Are you saying that in some schools, in a no hat policy, a child living with alopecia who may feel more comfortable, who definitely feels more comfortable wearing a hat, they wouldn't let them?
Yes. Yeah. That is something that a lot of the time we have to push for, and we have to say, we want these processes to be in place so that you have to kind of twist it and say they're going to be able to learn better, right? So make it a school curriculum type thing, the idea of it. But I mean, things like not sitting your child next to a vent because they're going to be extra cold because they don't have hair on their head, right? That can be included in a 504 plan. Having a safe space for them to go, being able to use a private bathroom because they're getting bullied in the bathroom. I mean, and I'm not saying this is the reality for all children. It is a reality for some, and those are the ones that we're talking about here today.
Yeah, well, my view is that one person experiencing it, one child experiencing is one too many, and it has to stop. And from my point of view, throwing it in the suicide aspect of it, So I recently met a bereaved mom. Again, this is for audience, listeners, members, viewers, I should say, that are on the suicide end of it. She was advocating. Her 17-year-old died and a few years ago, and so she immediately, as many of us do, go into some kind of activism, or we'll write books, or we'll do something, start a memorial fund or organization, and change policy, like whatever. It's this is like, mad is. I mean, I'm talking about suicide right at the moment, but anybody that loses a child will do this. So anyway, one of her wonderful activism projects for a while was going into schools and speaking. And she ran into resistance. I'm in Canada, folks. She ran into resistance. Why? Because it got to the point where a plaque or talking too much about her child, right, they thought would be a trigger, and basically influence other teens to commit suicide. And so she had to get out of the school system. So when you go back to, and I want to just circle back a little bit, when you're talking about these wonderful things that you're talking about in terms of, not sitting the child near the vent, giving them access to a private bathroom, letting them wear a hat or a scarf or anything else they want to on their head, advocating it, and bringing awareness, right in the front of the classroom. In the case of where we're dealing with child and teen suicides, and there has been bullying from in the school, whether in the schoolyard, whether in the classroom, I'm going to bring it back, and I am going to put it directly into the responsibility, in collaboration with parents in cases where it's necessary, with religious supports, with medical supports such as school psychologists, guidance counselors, all of these, the policymakers, the administration, all of these people have a responsibility to ensure that every child, teen, student is taken care of. And so in whatever way, so the thing that brings our worlds together, Deann, as I said earlier, at the heart of all of this is whatever has caused that child, whatever the age, to feel different, bullied, that it's become hopeless. And right now, even though it's a bit off topic, I was just reading in the news that there's a sextortion scam going on with teens very heavily in the United States, and it's already led to the death of two young men, I think like 16, 17 years old. So the scammer poses as, an alluring young lady, asks for exploitive pictures, then blackmails them for not only everything they own money-wise, which is really not very much at their tender years of 16, 17, whatever. And it gets, and the blackmail just keeps coming. The extortion just keeps coming. And it's like, who are these people?
Right.
Like, who are these people? And that's jumping down another rabbit hole. But it is still bullying. And I do think there is a responsibility. When I said I'd talk about my daughter a little bit. So for whatever reasons, it doesn't matter the reasons that they feel different. They could just feel different because they're super shy. And they can't, like you were saying, they can't speak. I love your idea of a card that in where you were mentioning, hi, my name is, I have this, read about it, leave me alone and read about it. But in her case, moving schools, which can always be really difficult for young people, and having to settle into one and not being able to easily make friends, the teachers didn't really pick up on the fact that when it was, okay, pair up for the science project, she had no one to pair up with. And so she really did experience a lot of loneliness and aloneness. And the teachers also missed putting her in a gifted program where she could be with more like-minded students. And it was so frustrating for me, but back then, and we're talking quite a while ago now because she'd be 39 today, we all miss the signs. Medical professionals miss the signs, but there has to be systems in place where everybody cares about each other. And that at the root of it for me is one of the best ways that we can ensure we're raising our children to be compassionate, empathetic human beings. And that differences, I know it seems cliche to say our differences make us stronger, and they do, but it has to be implemented. And that's where I'm going to go back to this whole clickbait stuff where media jumps on a story and everybody pretends that they care for 7 days, or in the case of, Smith, maybe a little longer. But then it goes away. And then you go, okay, have we actually really made any changes? And sadly, in my world, no, which is one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. And I know it's one of the reasons you're doing what you're doing. And so it's like the conversation has to start somewhere and the responsibilities have to fall somewhere to someone. And for me, I think it's family and community. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
I do believe that. Something you mentioned earlier, the word tender age, right? And I think that all our children are at a tender moment in their age and their maturity. And when we're, whether they read things into what they're seeing or what they think they're hearing too is another thing, right? I mean, I talked to my 17-year-old son. He's almost 18, like next week. And I'm like, could you have actually misinterpreted that look on somebody's face and how they looked at you? So there's this tenderness to this age where they're learning what people are thinking and feeling, and it may not be what that is, but then there's the very abrupt things that are happening. I think if we talk about what's going on in the school, in this case, I do not know what happened at school, right? I mean, I know what happened at school based on what I heard with this little girl. And it was not unlike things that I experienced myself. I mean, she was, from what I hear, and I can't say this is, everyday stuff, even once is horrible.
Yep.
Her wig was getting ripped off her head and she was getting smacked in the head in the classroom, right? And so if this was going on, where is the teacher's responsibility in this? Where's the school's responsibility? And, hearing that the mother said, I need help with this. She went to the school board, went to the principal, said, I need help. We need to talk about this. We need action to be carried out. And as far as we know, nothing was done. And it progressed really quickly. So when we talk about an event that happens on the Oscars, less than 2 weeks after this young girl kills herself because of this bullying, that makes kind of the uprising of the community even that much more strong. And so, yeah, does it start at home? This mother did everything she could. She did everything right from what I can tell. And there's no right or wrong about this, but she's like, we shaved her head. Look at this lovely, look at, she's owning it. She's doing it. She's feeling confident. And then, less than, I don't know how long the time went from there, but she did the steps that we all say, hey, this would be probably a really good idea. Hey, raise awareness. Let's talk about it. And then she wasn't really able to do that and have that within the home. And then I have no idea what was going on with these other kids who were doing this in the school. I don't even know what kind of home life they could have that would make this okay anywhere in the world, right?
I agree with you. And so it's a fine line. But think of it in terms of this, Deann, and with the greatest of respect to anyone listening. So if your child has a peanut allergy, and this became very, very big, as it should, when my son, who's now just turning 30 very soon, was 6 years old. So before that, they had I'm in Canada, they had just sort of had a few years where they started to integrate children with disabilities, and I'm talking severe disabilities, into the classroom. And so that happened, and everybody embraced that, and they had a carer with them all day long. And I believe that's the case to this day. I don't know all the ins and outs, and I don't know the pros and cons of it, nothing like that. That wasn't my experience, but that happened. But anyway, I remember the first time we got a notice home when my son was either 6 or 7, saying, okay, so no more peanut products to the entire school. We have one child here who has an allergy, it's life-threatening, etc. So again, not without any disrespect to allergies and only using that as an analogy, that is directly taking a health issue, and yeah, a severe one, that the whole entire school, parent community, everything jumps on board, works with, respects, complies with the policy changes. But if you were to look at any health condition or difference in a child as a severe life-threatening risk, dependent on how it's perceived, treated, and discussed, but just respected. Same thing, people. Let's look at it that way, and every person matters. It's not just about the peanut allergies. As important and as serious as that is, what about the child who has experienced one too many days of bullying or feeling miserable, hopeless, and isolated? Because let's face it, our kids don't talk to us, okay? They might tell us some things, but they're not going to tell us everything. So community is huge for them. So to not feel embraced or understood, what are we doing to protect that kid that after one too many taunts, okay, or one too many days of feeling they can't cope, they kill themselves? And that's happening, going back to the current sextortion stuff that's going on. That's what's happening. And in my world, when your child dies by suicide, it can be a buildup for however long of things they can't cope with that they may or may not confide in one close friend, if anybody. But as a child, as a teen, often these suicides are impulsive. Seriously, I've had too much. I'm going home. I'm ending it. It's happened to people I know. A dear friend of mine, happened to her 14-year-old. So I'm not just, sort of paying lip service to this. I'm very, very concerned about it. And you and I, obviously, Deeann, are not going to solve this problem having this talk. But what we can do is make a plea to anybody listening and watching, and to other people who are really giving voice to this at a very organic level, of people who have direct experience with it, and make sure, one, your kids are talking to you, and there are ways to do that. And two, if you have a kid that's got a bit of a mean streak, if the family home can't address it, teachers, people, administration, counselors, it has to be addressed somehow. And I don't have the answers for it. And I don't know if you have any ideas on that, but even just raising it, we can't make changes unless we know what needs to change. And I've always maintained we only know what needs to change if we talk to the people who are going through what they're going through, or in the case of parents being guardians of children going through something. Yes, I love what you say about, I wrote it down, follow the guidance of your child. And I love that. So everybody has to sort of work together, but the kids have to feel safe enough to trust that who they're, talking to about their deepest, their feelings as best that they can understand them, is going to help them, help them. And also, I think they don't want to worry us parents. I'm not sure why they don't fully talk to us parents, but that could be one reason. They really don't want to worry us, and I think a lot of them don't even understand what they're going through. But I also want to point out, even as we might be getting closer to the end of however long this conversation between us lasts, I just don't want to forget to add in, bullies are of all ages. Mean people are all ages. So it's basically about, how do we become kinder and more respectful and understanding of each other and what we live with. I expect you to actually have an answer, Deeann.
Lots of pressure. Yeah, I actually think that there aren't that many horrible cruel, mean people in the world. There's a pretty small percentage. And I think that the rest of the people are trying to figure it out. And, it's up to us to guide them, right, in this situation. And there's, I think I'd love to call my cousin Tara out, who is a teacher, and she reached out to me a few months ago and said, "Hey, I'd like to know if you have a video that can raise awareness, or that I can speak to my classroom about this. I have two kids with alopecia in our school," and she's a middle school teacher. And I said, I don't actually have anything. And so I made a couple videos, one for younger kids and one for older kids, and I kind of catered it to where they live and how many people in their community are living with alopecia. And then I talked about alopecia, and I just featured some photographs and things like that. And it's 5 minutes or less to each video, and I put music to it, whatever. And I'm like, okay, so if these teachers are looking for support and they don't want to take away from curriculum throughout the day, they don't want to have, a whole day of having Jeff from the Children's Alopecia Project come in. And by the way, he does do that because he wants to educate. He brings books. He does these things. But again, there's the resistance, right? We can't take away from our school day. And I don't know what the motivation with this particular school was, but I'm like, but yeah, can you show a 5-minute video educating people, not necessarily drawing attention to it? And at the end with my teacher, she said, "Oh my gosh, this student, he looked down at his feet. He didn't interact with his classmates. And by the end of watching the video with his peers, he stood up, walked to the front of the classroom, and talked about it, and here we go.
Aw, yeah.
It makes a difference. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I just want to point out here, I could just say to you, Deanne, I'm going to cut that out with the emotion, but you know what? People seeing this is the effects of just almost bearing the weight of feeling a responsibility to your community, me to my community. Don't you kid yourself. I have my breakdown moments too. We're not okay. Like, we're not okay all the way through. There are great problems in our respective communities that need to be talked about. And just because one person is doing it and has a voice, I know that for me, it was very hard to come forward and throw my voice into the ring, if you will, throw my hat in the ring and say, well, here, I've got something really important to talk about too. And while a large part of the work I do is in grief advocacy and support and personal growth and healing, these other issues have driven me. It basically the death of my child basically nearly destroyed my life. And the recovery process has been incredibly difficult, long, and painful. And that's a whole other stream of this show. But it all started because of difference and misunderstanding. And so I'm grateful that you express your emotion, because it makes it very, very real. I think one of the only things that is so sort of powerful in moving people to feel compassion is to witness the emotion, the painful emotion of another person, and or to be impacted by stories. Because as long as other people's lives, and that may not even be the community that's listening to what we're offering today, but I'm hoping it is, because let me tell you, anybody listening, watching, if your life is going great guns, okay, probably the wrong term. If your life is going great, one day it might not be. And you might find yourself vulnerable. You might find yourself bereaved. You might find yourself living with hair loss or some other type of loss. And it's not fun feeling isolated and alone and that no one understands you. And I would offer but I'm not going to talk about this from my end of it very much because I'm very respectful of any type of support in all of the different things that I'm impacted by in my life, grief, suicide, all that. But even support groups, they're just not enough because very few numbers of people maybe go to support groups. I know that's true for bereaved parents. And even if they do, they don't necessarily stick with it. And any type of support, in my view, always has to be with the aim to understand, empower, and heal. So I just want to throw that out there. And part of the way we do this, if there's no money to go for support, or there's no motivation, or it's too insecure to go to and be with other people, or the support group that you're looking for, the type of support you're looking for is not meeting your needs. The ability to learn through stories is very powerful. And I am very grateful myself, actually, that there is a platform that we have right now. It's one of the reasons I actually like to make any of the conversations I have with people who, come on this podcast and make it on video as well. Just a little extra work, but worth it, because when people can actually see what we're going through, they can look deep in our eyes and go, yeah, there's some pain there or whatever. It makes it very real. And it also makes it like, we're just not that different from other people. But anyway, I seem to be going a little bit on a tangent down another road. But it's important to show our vulnerabilities, Deann, and we do that in different ways, because the other thing, not understanding what we're living with, whether it's in your community or for children living with something that other people just don't understand or they make fun of, but just not the understanding, and we feel we're not understood by various other communities, medical professionals. They're not doing enough. There isn't enough material. There's not enough support resources. There are not enough voices in the community. There's not enough places to go where you feel like you belong. And that is absolutely true. As a bereaved parent, I have experienced that. It really creates a void, and it can make us feel like we're living on another planet. But anyway, that's again another talk for another day. But I just want you to know, Deann, that our voices count, your voice counts, and I know the work you're doing. Do you want to just talk a little bit again about some of the work that you're doing in terms of things that you can do to help parents who might be struggling with a child who's facing bullying? In other words, like, how do they talk to the child about it? I mean, you said that going right back to the beginning, there are numerous other ways Will Smith could have taken on those steps up to the stage. I absolutely love that. What are some of those things that, in your community, parents can do to help people be kind to each other, help raise awareness, help their child understand that what they're going through that may actually be bullying, but they don't know it? How they can help their kid become aware of that?
I do believe that parents do know their children best, so I don't believe there's one right way to do anything. There's conversations that, you can notice the quietness of your child. You can establish a relationship with your child's teacher. And this is, when I say teacher, this is in those younger years, right? When they only have one teacher. It starts to get a little bit more complicated as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
They're diagnosed in middle school or high school. That makes it a little bit more challenging. But when they are young, continue to have conversations with your kid. Hey, how'd it go today? And if they're, oh, you're pretty quiet today. You don't have to say, oh, did something happen? Sometimes it just comes out, that silence that happens after you ask a question. Let that be there. And a lot of the time, we do know things are going on, and talk to our children, whether they're in preschool or kindergarten or sixth grade. There are options to raise awareness, to to talk about it, and it's going to change as they age, right? I mean, they're not ready to talk today, but next year they might be at the beginning of school. We happen to have September is Alopecia Awareness Month, and that happens to be around the time school starts, right? And so a lot of awareness and advocacy goes on during that month. And I always say, I have a lot of parents who reach out to me and say, hey, I need to find a therapist for my child. And I'm like, oh, okay, is that, what about, I'd love to talk about that with you. And if there's some other options that we can explore first. And if you still want to do that, I can help you establish what you want to look for in a therapist who can help your child. Right. And so there's always the traditional route of going to therapy and getting counseling. But does that person really understand what loss is, how to grieve a loss, and how to talk to your peers about things? And they're so little. I always picture these really little kids and not understanding. And even if they talk to me as a coach, I'm like, your child is fine. Actually, you as a parent sound like you might need a little bit more support. But first off, I think that kids need somebody who looks like them, somebody who understands, and that may look like a support gathering, right? In the last couple of years, there haven't been in-person gatherings, and that's been pretty harmful to the population of the entire world. And within our community, there were camps that had to be called off and in-person support group meetings, which it's not like parents are meeting and talking about their child's hair loss. It's, hey, let's go to the park, and kids are just playing, and parents are, gathering at a picnic table and talking while their kids play. And I think that those gatherings are really important. But like you said, in other groups, Zoom meetings, they have their camera off because they don't want to be seen. So these are adults, right? Yeah. And so I always encourage them to feel free to do that, and just to show up as I am, right?
Yeah.
Show up as I am, and if they're comfortable without their camera or with their camera, that's, and next time it may change. And I've been meeting with our local kids on Zoom, and they happen to be all girls, and one of the grandmas really wants her grandchild to take her hat off, and I'm like, it's okay to show up as you are, no matter what you're wearing, in the comfort that you have. So
I love that. I'm thinking about it for, I mean, I almost, see, I don't have young children anymore, obviously, but, all of these things, and we didn't have Zoom, and, Skype was just sort of coming into its own back then. But what you're saying is just so important. Everything you're just saying about all these tools like that you've just mentioned, parents, if you're worried about your child or concerned about your child for any other reason, they don't have to be living with something visible. Everything that Deeann just said, please apply in your life as well in communicating with your child. I love what you said, Deeann. You don't have to say, did something happen today? But, listen, I still check in daily, pretty much daily, with my adult son. Make sure he's handling the pressures okay. Make sure that he's just okay. And, because there's a whole host of issues that when he was 13 when his sister died. And to your point, we were talking about earlier, about like counseling and schools stepping in and stuff like that. If they see a problem, but making it rather, that's what I was thinking about, rather than make it about the child that has the problem, make it more about the kids that don't and what their roles and responsibilities are to, respect, understand, and how to treat their classmates, just each other. So without necessarily pointing to someone's specific problem, these are the rules. We're going to make sure everybody pairs up, make sure everybody has a buddy, make sure if, wherever anything is sort of out of balance, that they can rebalance, and maybe giving children the voice in how to do that. Whether schools are doing this approach or not, I don't know, Deeann, because I'm going to tell you that suicide, well, it may not be up per se amongst children and teens, so youth considering to 25, maybe 26, it is an epidemic in almost every country, and one of the top killers of our kids. And it's coming from somewhere. And yes, we can take responsibility for in the home. And if I could go back and do a lot of things all over again, you bet I would do things all over again differently. And we need to have more guidance as to what those things are. But in my case, in my world, it's confronting your child. If you're worried, I can't tell you how many parents I've met over the years that say, I'm really, really, really worried about my child, and say, okay, so did you talk to them? Did you tell them? Did you ask them outright if they intend to harm or kill themselves? No, I could never do that. I could never do that. And you know what? I get it, because I was exactly the same. And so it's not always confrontation. It is communication. And you can bet I took that approach with my son. I wasn't worried about him ever ending his life. Didn't have the same worry about him I had about my daughter. And to be fair to all parents out there who are worried, we sometimes or often don't know what it is we're worried about. But I would wager to say, if you have a child that is different in any way, you're going to be worried about something. Just think you are. And it's that has to be addressed. And by the way, I just want to say, I don't know if it's changed, but I'll bring this up for parents who are watching this and are worried, or your child is a sibling of a sibling who has died for any reason. Talk to the school. Make sure that they put in, practices, less expectations for an agreed upon time for their child to produce schoolwork, homework, things like that. We actually made that request, and again, this is going back 17 years ago, and the principal of my son's school never relayed the information to his two teachers. And we had specifically said he just lost his sister in the summer. This was the September. She died July 26th. And it wasn't until November, when he was noticeably sick a lot, lethargic. He could not do his homework and stuff. We went and had a meeting with the teachers and found out they had never been told by the principal. And I was very upset about that. And the other thing is, for him, he we did the whole, do you want to see a therapist? Do you not want to? He did, he didn't, but mostly he didn't want to be made to feel different. So he held all of that grief inside and hid it from everybody. I think only 2 people knew that his sister had died. And he has continued in that vein ever since. And if he ever watches this, forgive me for disclosing that about you, my love, but it's true. And disclosing that can definitely help others, because I'm sure the majority of kids do that. I'm just about sure, because there's not enough support for them. There's just not. Yeah. So again, I'm bringing that up just because I wanted to have, we wanted to have this sort of shared discussion about the different problems in our different communities. And I think we've covered quite a bit, Deeann. Is there anything I missed from your end that you would really like to end off with?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of information out there, and I mean, we're talking about it. I don't know if, 20, 40 years ago when I was diagnosed, we weren't talking about it, but there is more discussion. We're going to be seeing people talking about it more often, and talking about anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be, ad nauseum. It's something that is important when we care about our children, right? And caring about them shows up in different ways. And
For sure.
these options for kids to share, and for parents to have conversations with teachers, with school staff, that it's really important. I always say it's really important that if you have a child who's wearing a hat and there's an agreement that they can wear the hat in school, that the entire staff needs to know about it, right? And
Yes.
they're not calling them out. You can't wear that in the lunchroom. Hey, why are you leaving class and wearing a hat? Why are you? I mean, there's so much hierarchy in schools, right? Too. And so you go, okay, it comes from the top, and they should be, there's just a nice cohesive way that things should be.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't, but there are possibilities to open up these conversations and to make it happen. I have a lot of parents who say, "Yeah, I didn't know what to say when we were going to talk to the school, but my child wanted to talk about it, so it became very important." And the teacher was like, "I don't know if we should do this." And then all of a sudden they're like, "Okay, I'm so glad we did this." Right? And so you have to pave the way sometimes. You may be the first parent dealing with this and the first child having to live with this in a school that doesn't understand, but you are paving the way for children who come after you.
Yeah. And it's such an important point. And I'm just going to throw into the mix here that these issues are not going to go away. Alopecia is not going away. Suicide is not going away. So we're dealing with it. The issue is in case of children and youth suicides is how many more do we have to go through? I haven't seen a lot of changes. I got out of support groups years ago. I wish I hadn't, but one of the reasons I did was one, there wasn't enough there. In fact, there isn't any where I live, and I'm on Vancouver Island. And the one that there is, it's about maybe 40 miles from me, and and again, hats off to anybody who's working in support, but for me, the focus has to be on bringing in ways to try and recover and heal and not just repeat our stories over and over and over again. So that can be a bit of a problem when you're looking for support. But the other thing, and I'm probably going to forget it, but I did have something I wanted to say, and I apologize. It may come back to me, but it was sort of in the vein that these problems. Oh yeah, I know what it was. One thing I've started to learn really recently. Again, this is for the group in suicide, but prevention is there's starting to be some really organic community groups pop up in Canada. And I've now come across the second one. And you know what? It was a mom that there's actually an advocacy group too. It's not a support group, but it's more an advocacy group. But it's either one parent or a group of parents that say, we've had enough. We're not getting the type of support, the type of resources we need in the more provincial or maybe there's some municipal organizations. And I really, really, really can't stand dial 10 or 11 digits if you're in trouble, which I've been, we're trying to get a 988 number in Canada, and the States is getting a 988 number to call. But it's not just dial the number, whether it's 10, 11, or 3 digits. It's the type of support that's on the other end. And part of the problem I've read about is for people reaching out when they're in trouble for any reason. And again, our world's, Deanne, you might have suicides from people who lived with hair loss at an older age because they just can't take the bullying or whatever the differences that piled on insecurities that impact every other area of your life. I'm not making wild assumptions here. I'm just wanting to include this as a possibility. But for the people that are at suicide risk and really need help, a lot of them don't reach out. I've read this because they're afraid they're going to be arrested or hospitalized. And that might just not be what they need. And so some organic groups are going up, which means that they are suicide support groups, pre and post-vention. I love the word post-vention. Never heard of it before, which means aftercare, after the call, follow up. How are you? But they seem to only be directed at support for a local area, not even region, just very local. But I want to be talking to some of those people because I want to see, how'd you do it? What did you have to do? Because hearing about this, maybe in part, this is something that we have to do, is establish things more by community and like local community. And trust me, I would be doing a physical support group if I could, but I just can't. And so this is my effort to provide support a little bit more outside local regional area. Every voice counts. I'm going to end on my part. Every voice counts, and we can't have enough of them and be talking too much. In other words, the more we talk, the more we bring people in in I believe you have a podcast too, right? And you are doing advocacy and awareness. So every time we do something and people listen and hear what we have to say and the people that we invite on our shows have to say, this can be extremely, and no doubt is very impacting. And that's one way that change happens, right? But we need it at
Absolutely.
all. We need it at all levels, and you know. So for my part, I'm going to end this off, but I will ask. So yeah. So is there anything else that Deanne that you want to talk about right now?
I I don't know that I want to talk about it, but I would love people to come on over to my own website and see the resources that I have available.
Yes.
So those videos that I made for my cousin that I've put up on YouTube to
Yes.
use publicly, you can share them. You can take them into your own school.
Yeah.
Of course, there's the option to have me kind of make a custom one for you and your child, should that work. But use them. And I don't even, if the child doesn't feel comfortable sharing that video with the classroom, don't.
Yeah.
Seeing and watching it themselves can help them feel a little bit more normal, like or the people that they're not alone, right? And I think that that's really important. And my book was kind of made to do that too.
Yeah.
Stories. We talk about stories, right? That
Yes.
you're not alone. This is happening to a lot of people.
Yes.
Other people around the world understand, and that goes for parents too. So those are the resources there that I have, and I have a lot of free resources on there for.
Yeah, I'll for sure be putting your link to your website and anything else from our previous episode there again. I also wanted to say one other thing. I thought about this before, and a comment I read in the news going back full circle to the Oscars was that nobody would dare have made a joke about someone who had hair loss because they had cancer,
Right.
or an obvious illness. And so why was this any different? And well, we don't necessarily have to start another conversation about that. Just think about that, people, because it's the same thing as bullying in school. It's the same thing about, making jokes. It's the same thing about pointing fingers. It's the same thing about making judgments about anybody for any reason. You don't know what's going on in another person's life. And it's been my experience that fear and really, which is at the root of so much, causes anger, and anger can cause meanness. And there's a reason that everybody is mean straight on up from childhood. And if we could figure out and find out and resolve all of those issues that are making people mean and angry and afraid, right? It'd be a different world, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Deanne, it's been amazing talking to you. And I know this is my first sort of public conversation I've had talking about what we've been talking about, and keeping it really mostly on the personal level and a little bit, branching out from that. And I really, really want to thank you for sharing the platform with me to do this. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do it again. We'll find another issue to talk about, right?
Absolutely.
I love this.
I appreciate you having me on again. I really do. And talking about something that's so close to my heart and to,
Yes.
48 million other people in the world. So
Exactly. So anyway, again, I'm going to be putting a link to both of our resources in the description. So anybody that needs help in any way that either Deanne or I can help you, terrific. But I know we both have lots of other resources on our websites to point people to other resources. I do it through my blog. I have a YouTube channel. We both have courses and so on. So we're offering as much as we can offer as two women trying to make the planet a better place. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks to you, Deanne, and we'll talk soon.